No niin, hyvää iltaa kaikille. Hyvää iltaa kaikille ja tervetuloa Urhean Koutsikornerin webinaariin. Nimeni on Hanna Möttölä ja toimin tämän illan isäntänä. Mahtavaa nähdä teitä näin runsaasti. Varmaan vielä osa valmentajista on tulossa mukaan, yli 200 valmentajaa kaiken kaikkiaan ilmoittautui mukaan. Koutsikornerin idea lähti minulle liikkeelle ajatuksesta, että meidän valmentajia olisi tärkeää lisätä tiedon jakamista läpi koko urheilukenttämme. Ja nimenomaan nuorten ja lasten valmentajille, jotka olette koko urheilumme kivijalka. Ammatikseen valmentavat kyllä löytävät haluamansa tiedon, mutta haluamme tarjota kiinnostavia esityksiä, mahdollisesti uutta tietoa sekä paljon ajatuksia herättäviä aiheita matalalla kynnyksellä kaikille valmentajille. Niinpä päädyimme Urhean, Suomen koripalloliiton ja Suomen koripallovalmentajan ryn kanssa pyörittämään tämä Koutsikornerin webinaarisarjan käyntiin. Joten paljon tervetuloa ja toivottavasti nautitte illan annista. Before I introduce tonight's guest, I want to remind all of you that we are recording this webinar. Also, please send the questions via chat during the presentation. We have reserved plenty of time for the questions, and we'll list them up as they come. After the presentation, we will open up the microphones and let you, the audience, ask the questions from our guests. And now it's time to introduce our first ever guest on our Coach's Corner webinar. Dave Love is a longtime NBA shooting coach with stops in Phoenix Suns, Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Orlando Magic. For the past 20 years, Dave has held shooting clinics around the world for players in all ages, skill level. He's a true sharer of the game, and those of you who don't follow him yet on social media, please do so tonight. I have the utmost pleasure to get to know Dave this past season, and he's helped me to become a better shooting coach. And I'm also grateful that he's here with us tonight, straight from Calgary via Zoom. Ladies and gentlemen, Coach Dave Love, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Coach. It's a pleasure to chat with you again. I've really enjoyed getting to know you over the last 6 or so months, and excited to see what we can do to help finish basketball. So thank you for having me on.
Well, we're grateful, and like I said, I hope all the coaches who are joining, are going to follow you on social media. I've been doing it for the past year, and I guess during this pandemic, the social media has become a great tool for coaches to get to know other coaches and follow webinars and clinics, and that's kind of how I wanted to start this Coach's Corner webinar series. And when you you kind of told me a few months ago that you would like to share your ideas and your knowledge of the game to the Phoenix audience, that was a kind of starting point for our whole program. So maybe you're going to be a returning guest when we get this thing rolling, maybe next fall or so. But all right, well, the topic for tonight is teaching young players, girls and boys, in a team setting. Like we had talks kind of on the side that it's not realistic that in Finland a shooting coach or individual coach has an hour and a half with a 14-year-old boy or a girl every week or twice a week, and so that's kind of the topic. How in a nutshell, how would you approach, how much time would you put on for let's say 12, 14-year-old girls or boys practice? How much time would you put on a coaching shooting, and how much the other stuff before we go into your presentation? That's a broad question.
Yeah, no. I mean, you're asking a shooting coach, so I would say 100% of the game should be spent on shooting, but obviously that's not realistic. I think especially at the younger ages, it should be a significant percentage of the time. And if this is the most important skill in the game, then and it's probably the thing that young players, I'm talking in the 12 years old or younger range, if they struggle with it, then 25 to 50% of your practice, I think, should be on shooting or involve shooting. And that doesn't mean that it's stationary or it's form shooting, but it should involve a shot, and there should be teaching moments included in that.
All right. Well, I won't keep you too long. I'll let you start your presentation. And like I told, after Dave is done with his presentation, we will open up the microphones and hopefully have a great Q&A session with one of the, or maybe the best shooting coach in the world. All right, take it away, Dave. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So let me start off by saying, everybody, that there is no one way to shoot a basketball. I have a theory. I have a template in my mind of what I want a shot to look like. But my goal is not to teach every player and get them to execute that theory perfectly. My goal is to take small pieces of information from that theory and use it to help individual players. And so it's not that you want to change everything about a player's shot to fit your theory. You want to use your theory to help the one aspect of a player's shot that's holding them back the most. The next thing that I really want to make sure we touch upon before I get into the formal presentation here is that my job is easier than yours. I end up working with some historically weak shooters, unbelievable basketball players, but just not great at that one skill in the game. But your job is significantly more difficult, and you face bigger challenges just because of the way that youth basketball is set up, and that's never going to change. The challenges have to do with time and facilities and attention span of athletes, and no matter what we do, we're never going to be able to change those things. So my hope within this presentation is to give you some ideas of how to take the advantages of my job, which are I get individual time with players, and incorporate some of those ideas within your team practice. And I've tried to structure this in a way where I'm not necessarily giving you solutions, because every one of your situations will be different, but hopefully I'm guiding you towards finding a solution that will work well for you. So we are going to discuss, just getting my improving shooting habits within team practices. I'm just going to get everything set up here. So the challenges that you guys face as youth coaches, you get limited time with athletes. You maybe only get a 90-minute practice once a week or a couple of times a week, whereas I can get a player individually for an hour every day if I wanted time to. You've got multiple different athletes all at the same time, all with different habits, and trying to figure out a way to coach them when they all have different things that they need to learn. And then you don't have any time to do this. So from what I understand, these are the biggest challenges that you face. And it's almost impossible to do deliberate practice in a group setting. And so we need to figure out some creative solutions to make a group setting as individual as possible. So I want you to, with every player on your roster, at the beginning of the season, ideally, look at their shooting mechanics and ask yourself, if I could only improve one habit, what would be the one habit that I could improve that would result in the most benefits to the player and to the team? Don't fall into the trap of trying to teach every player every habit and expect them to execute it perfectly. Instead, just focus on the most important battle and making sure that you win that battle. So if you divide your army and try and fight every single battle, you're probably not going to win any of them. But if you can focus all of your army on one battle, you have a great chance of winning that one. Try and do that with your individual time. Pinpoint that most important habit and focus on that in any individual time that you get. And what we're going to do over the next few slides is we're going to search for the little pockets of time that you can get individually with players. Please do not underestimate how valuable consistent, just 2, 3, or 4 minute stretches of individual time with a player can be when you're hitting on the same message consistently. So pick that one habit, identify the small pockets of time, and then win that over the course of the season. Improve that one habit over the course of the season, as opposed to trying to teach everything to that player in one workout. Now, hopefully, as we identify what the player is working on or needs to work on, we can make them aware of the habits and how well they're executing the habits. We can't expect a player to just learn what they need to do and then just change the habit. It doesn't work like that. There's a process that people go through in acquiring a new skill, and we have to give them time to go through that process. So in the beginning, your goal is just to help a player be aware that they are unconsciously incompetent, that when they don't think, they make this mistake. Okay, just make them aware. And as soon as they're aware that they make that mistake, they've already moved into the next phase of skill development, which is becoming consciously incompetent. They make the mistake, but they're aware that they're making it. Okay. Once they're into that phase, they're consciously incompetent, we have a chance to move them in to become consciously competent. They're able to do the right thing, but they have to be really mindful when they do it. This is where you're going to be spending most of your season, especially with youth players, is being consciously competent, making them aware of what their body is doing and what it should be doing, because kids spend far too much time not being aware of the habits they're practicing, and therefore they end up practicing habits that are holding them back. And then ultimately, through enough repetition and layering of drills, hopefully we can make those players unconsciously competent. They do the right thing and they don't need to think about it. It's possible to skip steps in this, but it's unlikely and it's really difficult. So just be aware of what phase a player is in. Are they aware of the mistake? Are they able to do things correctly when they are thinking about it? And then how much of their brain power do you need to give to focusing on that skill and adjusting drills accordingly? Now, some ideas on how you can start to find individual time to start to improve individual players' habits. Try and think about doing station work at the beginning of a practice, and we can break that into one station doing shooting, one station doing passing, one station doing ball handling, and break it up into a macro skill like that. But you can even take shooting and break that up into stations, where one station is focused on balance, and the next station is focused on their guide hand, and the next station is focused on the ball path, and have each station be an opportunity for the players to focus on one of the micro skills within the macro skill of shooting. You can start each practice with these stations and have a coach ideally at every station, but you probably don't have more than 1 or 2 coaches at a practice. So you may have to get creative and say, like, teach the team captains over the course of the season, or ideally teach all of the players to be the leader at the station. Clearly identify what they are working on at that station and teach them to hold themselves accountable to working on what they say they're doing. Just 5 minutes at a station will work wonders over the course of a season if you can stay consistent with the message that you're sending. Early on in the season, use this time to identify that one micro skill. So in your first practice or your first week of practice, you may be using the station to expose some of the bad habits and make players aware and move them from unconsciously incompetent to consciously incompetent by identifying what skill they need to work on. And as the season goes on, try and group players that have similar habits. So if these 3 players are all struggling with their balance, and these 3 players, their most important habit that they need to work on is their guide hand, have those players into the station, because now you can take that station and make it a little bit more individualized. Then start to make this time as individual as possible. You may have 4 players at one basket, all focusing on getting their feet wider apart and improving their balance when they shoot. So try and get a basketball in each of their hands so that they can each be focused on themselves. And it's an individual workout within a team practice. And anytime you get this individual time, make it be focused on the primary focus of that player shot, that one big habit that you want to improve, or that you need to improve over the course of the season. Don't waste your precious, valuable individual time by working on a secondary habit. Use group setting, group time to work on secondary habits. Try and keep your valuable individual time to a primary focus. So, other than having stations, what are some ways that we can find some ways to get individual work? Try and get 2 players to come 5 minutes before practice, or stay 5 minutes after practice. Hopefully you have nobody in the gym before your practice and you can get in there. If you can get 10 minutes, that's even better. And schedule that to say, like, on this day, I want this player A and player B, you guys come 10 minutes early or 5 minutes early, and player C and player D, you're going to stay 5 to 10 minutes late after practice. You may not have that luxury where a group is in before you get to walk in and your practice is supposed to start. But if you do have that luxury of time before or after, try and use it. Don't be afraid to pull 2 players out of warm-up. If you have 2 coaches, you've got the players doing a dynamic warm-up, it won't set them back dramatically over the long term as athletes if they miss 5 minutes of their warm-up once a week. So again, player A and player B can each be with an individual coach, and they miss 5 minutes of the warm-up or the entire warm-up, and you use some of that time to focus on that player's individual skill. When you grab water breaks, I would do this at the NBA level all the time. We'd get a 3-minute water break. Once the players grabbed water, I already have a basketball in my hand and I'm standing at a hoop, and I will just call them over, and we've got 5 free throws before the water break expires. All those little moments of just reinforcing the same message is what's going to lead you towards success. It doesn't need to be 45-minute workouts, although those can be tremendously helpful. If you don't have that luxury, just continue to find these little pockets of time. Then if there's a drill, and you might have to be careful with this emotionally for players, but I'll leave the idea with you for you to decide. If a drill doesn't suit a particular player's needs, if a player is working on restructuring their shot and they're very early on in the process, and they're only able to do form shooting from very close to the hoop, but the drill has players shooting threes. Pull that player out of that drill and go work on at the other end of the floor the things that will help them improve. If they end up shooting threes, all they're going to be doing is reinforcing the very habit that you're trying to break. So pull them out of that situation, and you'll have to be careful of how you handle that, especially with young athletes. But I'll trust you to figure that out for yourselves. Then clearly identify what you're working on with players and give them homework. We have to teach them. They don't know how to practice on their own. To them, practicing on their own probably just looks like having a basketball and shooting it. And there probably is no thought beyond that. And so we need to teach them the idea, okay, what skill are you working on? Okay, you're working on shooting. Great. Let's dive a little bit deeper. What micro skill within your shot are you working on? I'm trying to get my feet wider apart. Okay, great. What's a drill that we can do that will hold you accountable to getting your feet wider apart? And then identifying that drill, and what skills do you need to have to lead you towards that. We need to teach them this, and this won't happen in one conversation. This will be an ongoing conversation that you will have with your players, where in the beginning of the season you might have to start by just teaching them the skill, making them now consciously incompetent. And then in the homework in the following weeks, you might be able to start to give them, okay, what is a drill now that will help you with that habit? How many reps of that drill can you get? What is the skill that you're working on in that drill? And just teach them these things over time. Avoid generic programs for primary focuses. So if a player's primary focus is their shooting, and a player's primary micro skill they're working on within their shot is getting their feet wider apart, don't give them a generic program that has them doing a whole bunch of guide hand drills, or only a small amount of balance drills, and a lot of drills for the other micro skills within the shot. Try and make the primary focus as specific to the player and customized to the player as you possibly can, so that they're maximizing that time that they might be spending on their own. Now you're into a group setting. In your group setting, in your group drills, it's almost impossible to be deliberate about your practice, especially for young players, but we have to try. So make sure that you identify in any group drill the situation, which is an explanation of the drill. We have a line here with basketballs, and we have a line there without basketballs, and this line that's all the situation. You also need to identify for the players the habit that you're working on within the situation. So the situation might be a baseline drift, but the habit is, I want you to start your shot on 2 feet, finish your shot on 2 feet, or start your shot with your feet wide apart, finish with your feet wide apart, or make sure that your guide hand comes off the basketball. Those are the habits within the situation, and the players need to be thinking about both, not just the situation. If they're only thinking about the situation, they're probably going to revert back to their old habits. And then be willing to adjust that situation for the players that might struggle with it. So it might be you're doing a baseline drift to a corner 3, but one of the players isn't ready for that kind of distance yet. So they can still do a baseline drift, but they're doing it 15 feet from the basket. You can adjust early on when players are just moving from unconsciously incompetent to unconsciously competent. You can adjust the drill by slowing down and forcing them to look at their feet, or forcing them to stop at a certain point and be mindful of taking their guide hand off, and just making sure that we're reinforcing the habits that we're actually trying to build. When you're in group settings, try and focus on, for the group, things that anybody would benefit from. Any shooter will benefit from being more balanced. So that looks like getting your feet wider apart and getting into an athletic body posture. Anybody can work on that. Any young player, 12 years old or younger, probably even 15 years old or younger, can benefit from trying to get their guide hand off the ball. So if you're in a group setting, give a habit of, for the group, give them a habit of something that will benefit the entire group. Balance and guide hand are great ones. Then, as we talked about, adjust the level of challenge for the drill to meet the level of the ability in the skill. As they keep improving, keep making the drill a little bit more challenging. So you can add defenders to it. You can add decisions to the drills. We can constantly be playing with the drills, simplifying them in the beginning to help the players execute habits better, and then complicate the drills as they improve at those habits. So the drill isn't the most important part. And I get asked all the time, hey coach, what's a good drill? What's your favorite shooting drill? I don't have a favorite shooting drill. All of my shooting drills are specific to habits. And we need to know first what habits we're working on. Then we're going to have to make sure that we hold the players accountable to actually doing that. And in the beginning of your season, that might mean moving in, slowing down, being very deliberate about the habit, making them aware of what they're doing. If they're not actually doing the things that we say the drill is working on, then the drill is pointless. We need to be willing to adjust the drill to find the appropriate level of challenge. And then we have to stay patient enough to develop this over the long term. So you might do a drill with no development for a month because you only get one practice a week. And the drill exposes a habit that is really important to the players, but they don't do it particularly well. You have to clearly identify the habit that you're working on, adjust the drill to slow it down, and then stay patient enough to let them get good and comfortable with that skill before you start to complicate it. And so be patient enough to give them that time. So just to kind of recap some of the things that we've talked about. Identify as clearly and as focused as you can what part, just one part of each player's shot that's holding them back. Try and then find 5 minutes of individual time. Can you get somebody in before practice? Can you get somebody to stay after practice? Who are you going to have for water breaks? And schedule that so that you know exactly who's going to get the time before practice, the time during the warm-up, which coach are they going to be with? Does the coach know that the habit that they're working on? What drill are you going to use? Try and be very scheduled and detail oriented about when, how you're going to use that time. Create individual time in a group setting by using stations as much as you possibly can, especially early on in practice, especially early on in the season. When you're into group time, focus on more broad habits that everybody can work on. And don't try and fix everything. Pick one battle and try to win that battle. Win that battle over the course of the season. They will be a better player. The next season, you can now focus on a new habit. And the luxury that you have as coaches, you've got all these challenges of limited gym time and players with multiple habits. The luxury that you have that I don't is you have years to improve players' habits. A 12-year-old, they feel like their games are meaningful, but when they're 18, they're not going to remember the games they played when they were 12. We have 6 years to develop that player until they get into national programs and higher levels. And so take advantage of that time as much as you possibly can. Now, Coach mentioned some of the things that I have. I have a free shooting newsletter. If you are able to go to coachdavelove.com and sign up for my free shooting newsletter, where I dive fairly deep into the micro skills of shooting and talk about the ways that I work. And I'm starting to incorporate a lot more video into these sessions. So I try and share as much as I possibly can, and my newsletters where I share a lot of information for free. So sign up for that on CoachDaveLove.com. Coach and I are discussing the possibility of me coming to Finland in the future and running some clinics, or as I call them, shot refinement training camps. And so if you are interested in potentially hosting one of those clinics, you can go to coachdaveLove.com/host-clinic and just fill out the information on the form there, and tag your location so that I know where you are. And when I'm planning on coming to Finland, hopefully we can reach out for you. If you want drill ideas, as I said, most of my drills are specific to habits. I have drills then that I use to isolate habits, and then I have other drills that I use to build habits. And I can take you through that process of in more detail for actually changing a player's shot with my shot development system bundle. That bundle is broken up into 3 different programs. Each program is based on one of the most common bad shooting habits: balance, guide hand, or arc. And I show you all of the drills that I use and all the ways that I play with layers of drills to search for that appropriate level of challenge. You end up getting over 180 videos. And some of those are drills, some of those are teaching points, and some of them are layers. All of the information that I share with my NBA players, that shot development system bundle is $127. But if you use, and I'll type this in here, I'll just stop my screen share and type into the chat. I've got a, I'll direct you towards it. So if we're going to CoachDaveLove.com, shot development system -bundle, you go to that website, but then at checkout, you use that coupon code webinar10, then you'll save 10%. So this is a thank you for giving up your time to come and spend with me. And so please look for that. I believe the coupon code will work for most of the products, but it would direct coaches towards the shot development system bundle as much as possible. So Coach, if you want to jump back in with me, we can go into some of the questions that people might have. And we can do this as long as you want. You and I have talked about that I'll spend another half hour, 45 minutes, an hour if people want.
All right, well, really appreciate it, Dave. I think your message is really clear, and for all of us junior coaches, and especially the ones with maybe a little bit less resources, more players and less coaches, there is no magical skills. Probably long time ago when I had the honor of playing the NBA, people were asking, what are the magic drills that you guys do in the NBA? And they were kind of disappointed when saying they're pretty much the same drills when we did when we were 15, 16, 18 years old. It was just a matter of now it was world-class athletes, and maybe the techniques were taken to the next step, but it is the same drills. So could you maybe share like a common shooting drill with just an individual player, whether it's a form shooting or technique that you would honestly say that you taught for 12, 14-year-old girl or boy and an NBA star, just in a nutshell. So just so coaches understand that it is not about the drills, it's just how good you get at those drills, which leads to you being great in the games.
Yeah, pick any one of my drills, and I do them with the 11-year-old girl and the 6'9", 29-year-old multimillionaire in the NBA. All of the drills that I use, they get used with young players that are just learning, or used by professional athletes that are struggling. So one that surprises people, I'll do a version of form shooting where just starting at the set point at the position up above the forehead, holding that position for 3 seconds with the guide hand beside the ball but not touching, and then lifting from there. And the reason the drill is so slow moving is because we're trying to be very precise about where our hand is positioned on the ball. And so you hear, okay, slow moving, close to the hoop, form shooting, and you usually think this is a drill for young players. This is even more important for professionals to be doing because their habits are so ingrained. And young players, unfortunately, or older young players, meaning like late teenagers, they tend to think like, oh, form shooting's for kids. And it's not. Like, I'm sure, Coach, you did a ton of form shooting in your professional career. And it's equally as important at that level, or probably even more important at that level.
All right. And I'll ask one more question, and then we will open up for the audience. And hopefully this is not a common Finnish audience, as I would always tease the Finnish press because they never open up their mouth and they never ask a single question. So let's hope we're in the 2020s and we Finns, we're brave enough to open up our microphones and ask questions. So coaches, get ready. I'm going to open up the microphones here in a second. But you talked a lot about habits, micro skills. In a nutshell, what would you say are the main, top 2, top 3 micro skills that you see for youth players that are most common that need to be improved? Let's say for 12 under 14-year-olds, and then 14 to 16, 17-year-olds. And a follow-up question: does that vary between boys and girls? So what are the main micro skills that you see that need to be improved? And does that go, if you're 12, 13-year-old and then 15, 16-year-olds, yeah, does that vary then? And then also, with the boys and girls, are there differences?
Okay, I'll answer the second half of that first. I don't tend to notice too much of a difference between boys and girls as far as the biggest micro skills. If you gave me, okay, what are the 13 most important micro skills? By the time we get down that deep there'll be a couple of things that I'll say, like, girls tend to do this, boys tend to do that. But for the big stuff, they tend to be the same. Then what are the 2 or 3 most important? If you only give me 2, I'm going to say how your feet connect to the floor, like how your feet are positioned on the floor, your foot placement, how you push with your legs, that foot floor connection, and then your hand to the basketball connection, where your hands are in relation to the basketball when your guide hand comes off, the angle of your fingers. Those will be the 2 most important. If you allow me a third, then I'm going to say the path that the ball follows from a triple threat position up through a set point to a follow through and a release. So I think if I can be more specific, players don't get their feet wide enough. Young players don't practice from a game body position enough. They practice too upright because their practice, too much of their practice is them just shooting around by themselves. So they stand up. There's no defender there, and then when they have to get into a stance, they're not used to it. And then we all grew up probably shooting the ball with 2 hands and learning to transition from a 2-handed shot into a more consistent 1-handed shot is probably the biggest one once we get into about the 14 to 15-year-old range.
All right, good stuff. All right, well, now I will open up the chance for you coaches to ask questions, and we got a couple of questions here that were sent before this webinar and now on this chat. So first I will turn open the microphone for John Lahr from from Lahti Basketball. You had a question about Coach Love. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Dave.
Hi.
Thanks for the presentation. It was really interesting. I followed you on social media for a while too, so I've been enjoying that.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm from Edmonton, so there's another
You're not.
tidbit for you.
I don't notice. Sorry for all the Finns in the group. Edmonton is a 3-hour drive north of the city that I live in, so it's a coincidence that Coach here is.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway, the question was, in a lot of the coaching situations that I have, I find that there's initial resistance from many of the players. There's a few players. It seems to me it's like a ratio of about 1 to 5 or even 1 to 10. That there's those that want to listen and are ready to make changes, and then there's those that maybe their habits is just that they're so ingrained already that they have difficulty changing them. But there's also this sort of idea that this is my shot and this is how I do it, and they would resist then any sort of advice on how to change things. And do you have any strategies to get past that?
Yes. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to know the battle that you're fighting with that player. So some of the potential battles that you might be fighting is they think they get good results, and they can be very naive where a player could be shooting 40% from the free throw line in a season, but they think they're an 80% free throw shooter. And so are they just unaware? Are they unaware of what they actually look like? Are they unaware of why it matters? Some players don't even realize that their feet matter within their shot. And so they're resistant to changing their feet because they're like, I shoot the ball up here. Why are we even talking about my feet? In that case, you need to teach them why the thing even matters. So first of all, you have to understand what exact part of it are they resistant to? And then the two things that they can't hide from, you can't hide from statistics and you can't hide from video. So if they say, well, no, my shot looks fine and it goes in. Okay, well, looks fine. And to your eye, you say, well, it doesn't look fine. You're completely out of position. You can take video and say, oh, okay, you think you look like Klay Thompson when you shoot? Like that's the picture that you have in your mind. Like, here's what it actually looks like. And sometimes players go, oh, wow, I had no idea I looked like that when I shot. I thought when I took my first video lesson in golf, I thought I had a nice golf swing. And then the second the video came up on the screen, it wasn't even like the video just came up in a freeze frame of me addressing the golf ball. And I thought, I didn't know I did that. Like, I didn't know I was in that body position. And so showing them what they truly look like and what they truly do, and then giving them the stats of, okay, a good free throw shooter, what would they make in games? Okay, let's say it's 75% or higher. Then you need to be able to say, well, okay, then in practice, you should be able to make 80 or higher. Let's shoot 100 free throws right now and see how many you make. And if they shoot 50, then you've got some evidence that says, hey, like, what was today just a bad day? Okay, let's do it again tomorrow. If you still make 50 tomorrow, I'm showing you all the reasons that you need to change. And then the last one that I'll do is if they're resistant because they think like, I can make shot, I'm a good shooter for 12. So I don't need to change my shot because a young player will think good shooter for 12 means I'm going to be a good shooter when I'm 18, and it doesn't. I'll say to a player, listen, go play against 14-year-olds. Have you played against 14-year-olds? Yeah. What happens? I don't shoot as well. Yeah, because the habits that you have when you're playing against better players are harder to synchronize. And so you're going to be playing against 14-year-olds eventually. If you still have 12-year-old habits, you're going to get 12-year-old results. and you're already showing those don't work. So those are some of the strategies that I work. I try and really make sure that I'm that my tone is positive and that I'm on their side. I'm not fighting against them on this. I'm on their side and I want to help, and then I'm guiding them towards making the decision that, okay, they need to do it. And so just really be aware of your tone within those conversations as well.
All right, that's I truly agree. I think in my experience, trying to learn away from, try to forget the old bad habits is a lot harder than trying to learn new ones. So it's a difficult task. But all right, next we're gonna have my old teammate Mike Pounds from Kotka. You had a question. Please, you can also open up your videos, so you don't just see me and Dave's face. All right, Mike, go ahead.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for the lesson. My question was, how should we ratio, like instead of just shooting, let's say, 300, 400, 500 shots a day, and then like in-game high tempo shooting? And does it vary from age? I have, 17 late teenagers, and then I have 12-year-olds. So should I emphasize with the 12-year-olds more getting a lot of shots up instead of with the 18-year-olds getting more game-like shots?
With the 18-year-olds, I would definitely do more game-like shots, especially in group workouts, in group settings. And then if you get individual time, I'd use that to not worry about a game situation, just worry about the habit and how game-like can I make the situation, but the habit has to be correct. So with older pro players, I will, when I get individual time, we may not get to a game shot for months, because we're just spending that time as individuals building up until we're finally able to actually execute these skills. With young players, I wouldn't worry about the game shots. I would worry more about developing the habits. I would focus more on the habits that occur in all situations as opposed to particular situations. So I would really slow things down and try and build it over the course of the season, starting with starting with form shooting in the beginning of their season, and then slowly being able to, form shooting with a little bit of movement, form shooting that's a little bit faster with more movement still, and just building that throughout the season. So a good number of game shots in group settings for older players, a lot of habitual shots for older players in individual time, and then for young players, focus on the habits.
All right, you got a Mike follow-up question, or you're happy with the answers?
I'm happy with the answers.
Thank
you.
All right, good.
Thanks,
next
Mike.
one. Next one. Rikulanti, you had a question about how to use videos and identify the most pressing issues, with the players in the shot. So go ahead.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for the great presentation. So one of the issues you had, or one of the key points you had, is that you should pick up the key issue that the player has and then focus on that key issue. Is that kind of art that you just feel, or you see what is the key issue, or do you have a tools or framework how to actually identify that key issue? So if there are, let's say, there are several issues in the shooting, in the whole shooting process, how to pick up the one, or how to ensure that, okay, I can see that the follow through is not there, but I can perhaps identify that as a coach, but I may miss some other parts of the shot who are actually the more important issues than the follow through. So do you have any advice or any tools or any framework how to do this identification work?
Yes. I mean, we could spend 3 hours just talking about this, but I'm going to try to get you something helpful in a few minutes. The two areas of their player shot that I focus the most attention on will be their feet on the floor. And so I'm looking to see, are they able to move, but then get stationary as quickly as possible? And then are they able to keep their body fairly simple throughout the shooting motion? Or are they off balance and their body is very complex in the shooting motion? So really a lot of that comes down to how wide are their feet, how athletic is their posture, or are they standing up too much? So that'll be area number one that I focus on. Area number two will be the hand position on the ball at the set point, at this position right around here. And I'll use the spin of the basketball as an indicator of whether a player has pushed the ball in the correct direction. If a ball spins like this on the x-axis, it's because they push the middle of the ball towards the hoop. That ball has a very good chance of going straight. If they push the side of the ball away from the hoop, we can still get it to go straight, but it's going to be harder and more complex, and it will spin differently. So I'm using the spin to see, okay, where do I need to look, where are their hands positioned on the basketball? I do take video, and just with a cell phone in slow motion, and I end up taking a lot of video standing behind players, because you can see where their fingers are in relation to the basketball a lot better from behind than you can from the front. And I think the angle of the fingers are really important. So the feet and the set point are where I spend most of the time trying to figure. You mentioned a few times a follow through. I almost never coach a follow through, because if we get the set point correct, the follow through happens naturally. And so the follow through will just give me another indicator of, are they out of position here? If I'm seeing this kind of a follow through, it's almost always starts from this kind of a position instead of that kind of position. This is what I need to change, which will help change the follow through. And then it's a lot of just experience of working your way backwards. Start with the ball. Where was the hand on the ball to get the ball spinning that way? Where did the ball move to get to that position? And just continue to work your way backwards in the shot to see, okay, I'm seeing this. What is happening earlier on that might be causing that? And unfortunately, it's just a lot of experience of, but anyways, I'm rambling. But those are the two biggest areas that I would focus on.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Dave, you talked, that last answer a lot about the hand position, and I know you're, how players, the shooting hand is placed on the ball is one of your three non-negotiables. Could you, in a short, kind of go over, how do you, when you meet a player, you measure his hand and then kind of show him, where he should be on the ball. Could you kind of just go over that? Because I think it's, I started doing it with our high school players, and then when I kind of, first showing on, I kind of, luckily I did it naturally, but then when you were the first shooting coach that, put it in words and showed it, of course I went and took my measurement and tried to measure, where my hand is, and luckily, that's probably why I had a pretty good back spin on my ball. My hand was placed correctly. But could you kind of go over that in a short, and how early of an age you would do that with junior players? Kind of ask them with that.
I wouldn't worry about this for players younger than 11 or 12. So we'll start with that. The older the player is, the more important this is. So we want, if we've got the basketball, if we can lift both sides of the ball evenly, that ball goes straight. That's just physics. We need to have the middle of our hand underneath the center of the basketball so that we're supporting both sides of the ball evenly, and then the ball will go straight. To get the middle of our hand underneath the middle of the ball, we have to know what the middle of our hand is. And so I will do a measurement with players. Well, I'll ask them to grip the basketball, spread their thumb out wide into a wide but comfortable grip. We're not trying to pawn the ball, it's just wide and comfortable. And then I will have them measure with, so this is my guide hand, this is my shooting hand. With their guide hand, measure the distance from the index finger to the tip of the thumb and compare to that, the index finger to tip of the pinky. 90 to 95% of players that I've met, like not even worked with, I'm talking about tens of thousands of players now, these two distances are almost exactly the same, 90 to 95%. Occasionally, I'll find a player who the middle of their grip is over here. So if those are the same, we've just discovered the index finger is the middle of their hand. Some players will find here. No player will discover that if they spread that thumb out, that the distance from the middle finger to the thumb is the same as middle finger. Those two are not the same for anybody. So if we want to get the middle of our hand underneath the middle of the ball, we need to make sure we understand what the middle of the hand is. And it can vary from player to player, so do the measurement. But I think you'll find that the index finger is the safe assumption to make if you don't have time to measure with each player.
All right. Yeah, I think it is simple as that, but it is so important because I think when you learn to follow the spin of the ball over the players, you truly see the good shooters, naturally good shooters, the ones you need to try to change the habits or improve the habits. But of course, we have history of basketball is full of shooters, great shooters with right. not perfect shooting mechanics to our liking. So like I said, like the first when you started this presentation, there's no perfect shot. It's all unique, but I think for junior players, we should try to help them try to find that easiest way to shoot well. All right, good. Next one, we got Jipe Siponen from Topola. You got a question?
Yeah, hello, Dave. So thanks for joining to present to us. And I have a question for you about dipping the ball, and let me explain the context. So obviously, a lot of youngsters want to shoot with range. They watch Dame Lillard's and Stephen Curry's and all that. But what then obviously happens is that easily the mechanics and the technique breaks down. So of course we could coach them the Hoosiers way of, you first shoot from 10, when you can make, then you move to 15, and eventually when you're 15 you can shoot 3-pointers. But I guess we all know that won't fly. So what are your thoughts on dipping, and what would you advise on teaching? Then what are the pitfalls with the dipping and all that?
Yeah, this is one of the big shooting debates, and like almost all big shooting debates, the answer is not one or the other. The answer is probably in the middle. So we need to understand dipping. Dipping is the process of getting the ball low enough to generate enough force for the shot. And to me, that's all it's about. And so my rule for dipping the basketball is as much as you need to for the shot that you're shooting, and as little as possible. So if a young player is shooting a 3-point shot, they're going to need to generate a lot of power. They can't just catch a ball up above their head and shoot it from there. They're not strong enough to be able to do that. They will have to get the ball lower and to generate some force going up. But it takes more time. If you can catch a ball here and only go up from there, if you're strong enough, you will save time. And we're starting to see now players like Duncan Robinson, who had a couple of great shots. I think it was in the Eastern Conference Finals last season, where he caught the ball high for a 3-point shot and kept it high and shot it and made them over an outstretched defender. If he had dipped the basketball, that shot would have been blocked. So as little as possible, but as much as necessary is my rule. And people will say, but it's for rhythm as well. Rhythm is just your habit, and we can change our habits. We can start to get comfortable with catching a ball here and only going up for here, rather than having to dip it to my waist if I'm shooting a 15-footer. We can practice that skill and develop a different rhythm for that particular shot. Let dipping only be about power generation.
Very good answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we will have Jenny Laaksonen. Jenny, you had a question.
Yes. Hi. Thank you for the lecture. I have been, wondering if the form is not perfect, but the players making the shots, do you want to still change the form or not? And you already answered about the little kids, but what about the teenagers? When they are growing a lot, what would you change something at the time?
Great question. So yes, I will probably still continue to change, because these players are far from finished products. And anytime we ask them to play against an older age group, they're probably going to struggle, which means the smaller windows, the faster game, the longer defenders make it tougher to synchronize complex shots. So it's not that I need their form to be perfect, but if they have a complicated shot that they can make against their age group and they can't make against the next group up, or they're not consistent with, then I would always encourage them to try and simplify. And it doesn't need to be simplified to perfection. It can just be simplified to better. So yes, I would continue to encourage a player to continue to work. The reality is, kids are funny. They say, I don't want to change my shot. And yet they're constantly changing their own shots. So really, when they say, I don't want to change my shot, what they mean is, I don't want to do work. And you can't really become a great shooter if you're not willing to work at it. So the first thing I'll ask a player is like, okay, are you willing to do the work? Like, this is going to be hard. Are you willing to do it? Or would you rather, like, you're average right now, would you rather just stay average? And so if they have big dreams, regardless of their age, I would still be trying to simplify their shot. Now, if a player is 13 and you talk to them and they say, I only play basketball because my friends play basketball, and I don't care about playing at college or playing within a national program or playing professional, I'm playing basketball just because it's fun, then I might be less worried about encouraging them to change. I would still want to teach them and coach them, but they're there for fun. If they're playing basketball because they have big goals, then it's my job to help them achieve their goals. So sorry for getting long-winded on that. But hopefully that gives you some ideas.
All right, I have a kind of follow-up on Jenny's question.
Sure.
You know, I mean, this happens on, you know, on the NBA level, you know, at least, you know, you hear coaches or someone, you know, like, yeah, we don't want to change that player's shot during the season. We wait until the off season. At that level, you can sort of understand it, yes, but for a junior player, you know, if let's say it's a 14-year-old player, and you're in November, October, November, you know, would you just, you know, if the shot needs drastical change, you know, would you dive right in, or would you wait for so-called off season to make changes, and then kind of waste the first 6 months before the off season happens? What's your take on at the junior level, and then, you know, in your experience in the NBA? Because I believe there's no, you know, why wait till tomorrow if you can change it today? You know, I know we're not naming any names here, but we all know, you know, some current NBA players who would definitely need to change their shot. But you know, you see them year after year, you know, shooting the same mechanics and not being a good shooter. So what's your take on that? I guess mostly for the junior players, but then, you know, with your experience with the NBA players, and have you done it, you know, during the season? And how did an NBA player, who they all have egos and they want to protect their own brand, and then if you go and kind of, you know, sort of, you know, mess up their shot for a little while before it gets better, you know, what's your experiences with those?
Well, I'll start with the youth players first. I think the younger we get, the younger the players get, the more important development is in, and the less important results are. The older a player gets, the more we can argue that results matter. So if you are, I think with each player that we work with, we have to look at them and say, right now, is it more important for them to win this game or improve as a player? If I had to choose, which of those two things are more important? And I would hope with a 13-year-old, we'd say, I don't really care about whether we win this game. I want them to become better basketball players. And so I think that leads you towards the answer of, you start improving the habits. You start getting better at what the things that are holding you back. An argument can be made for wait until the end of the off season, but the world that we're living in now, there doesn't seem to be an off season. Like here in North America, you go from your school season into your club season, into your provincial season or state season, and then back into school, and there's never an off season. So at some point, if this part of your game is holding you back, you're going to have to invest in it. And I'm of the same mindset as you, Coach, that you know, if it's really holding you back, why not now? With pros, I always want to try and start that process at the beginning of the off season. You most of the time have that luxury, and occasionally you'll get a player that you're meeting at the beginning of the season, and that's not ideal. But I'll always be aware of how much are they playing. Like if they're a player that's playing 4 minutes a game, then it's probably not a big impact on the team, and we can probably start to break something down at that point, because maybe they're shooting one shot a week in a game. Like, let's take advantage of this time. But those are the sorts of things that you have to be aware of. Would I want my star player rebuilding his shot halfway through a season, even if it's broken? Maybe not. But I guess the last part will be how broken is it? If somebody's shooting below 50% from the free throw line, then I think you start at that point. No, even if it's in the playoffs, like you're not going to get much worse than below 50% from the free throw line. So why not start now?
All right, good. We had a couple questions that came in before the webinar. Any specific ways of teaching weak hand shooting? So we're probably talking about, finishing at the rim, not becoming too, getting left and right-handed jump shots. So is there any way you teach it, for juniors?
Yes, with really young players, I'll really start to plant the seed early on this where, okay, I'm right-handed, and here's my left hand. I'll just give players, okay, up against a wall, just shoot 10 shots, not even shots, but just try and push the ball towards the wall with your guide hand. Now then stand with your back to the wall and lift the ball up over your head. And then stand with your shoulder against the wall and just control and not even give them a target in the beginning, because the ball is going to be all over the place anyway. Just let them get comfortable with having a ball in this hand and making different kind of movements with that shot, like an underhand lift. Can you scoop the ball like a finger roll would be? Let them get comfortable with the broad skill of just controlling the ball with their weak hand. And then as they get more comfortable, and that may take a year, then you can start to get into, okay, let's just try and hit the backboard. And I'm talking like 9-10-year-olds that I want them eventually to be creative enough to have different finishes around the rim. So I want to, as soon as I can, expose them to different kinds of ways to finish around the rim. And I won't expect results in the beginning, but I'll just allow them the time to get comfortable with it.
Right. Another one, what are teaching cues to help rhythm? What teaching cues do you use for young players to help the rhythm on their shot?
I rarely use the word rhythm. I describe it, and I hope this is the same thing. I hope this is the same idea, just with a different word. I talk about synchronization, like getting everything working together in the correct order at the correct times. Rhythm to me implies just comfort. And if a player is a weak shooter, I don't care what their rhythm is. Their rhythm isn't working. I want to get the synchronization of everything working for them better. So the biggest cue that I would use for synchronization or rhythm would be just getting the ball moving first. If we've got the ball down in triple threat position, keeping our legs bent first as we're lifting the basketball, and then the legs start to push at this point. If we start the legs and the ball leaving the triple threat at the same point, the legs are going to be extended far before the ball gets to a shooting position, and you're going to have legs pushing, then arm pushing. We want those two to happen at the same time. So biggest cue would be keep your things like keep your legs bent. Although, all right, let's do a couple minutes here on cues, because this is something that, quite honestly, I've just learned in the last couple of years. There are internal cues and there are external cues. Internal cues are things to do with your body. External cues are things to do with the basketball or the flight of the basketball. It will help. Neither are bad, but external cues are better. If players can relate to them more, they have a better chance of helping. So I tend to start with internal cues to like teach a player, I need you to keep your legs bent, internal. And I'm still very new to some of these, like I'm not sure I have a great external cue for that. But external cues tend to be more analogy based, like more feeling based. So I just wanted to make sure that we understood that as well, because it seemed like a natural time to bring it up.
All right, and the Canadian connection continues. John from Edmonton, and now from Lahti. You had another question.
Yeah, I was just wondering about whether you have some sort of strategies for teaching floaters, and whether you find that is it a completely different shot than just a regular jump shot, or and even what age are you starting to teach them at, and do you prefer 2-foot floaters, 1-foot floaters?
These are all creative solutions that sort of this, if you guys hear a dog barking, and my dog's just being weird, so I may have to yell at her in a second. These are all creative solutions, and the more creative solutions we can have, the more well-rounded a basketball player is going to be. So preference between 1-foot or 2-foot floaters, no, I don't have one. They're both a tool that can be used at different times. And even wrong foot, that's what, Charlie, stop. Sorry, it's a little teaching tool. Charlie, stop it. So,
Dave, can I jump in? Did you use that with your players?
No.
Okay.
This is, I have a much larger water bottle for the players. This
All
one
right.
is just. Where were we? So,
1-foot floaters, 2-foot floaters. Yeah. You didn't have a preference.
Learning them all. Here's the one thing that I don't like about floaters and runners in games, or the way that they're being taught right now. I don't like the dead hand, no wrist snap floater. I don't need a full wrist snap on everything, but the wrist snap is a huge part of keeping the ball online. Like when we talk shooting, we tend to give this simple answer of we snap our wrist to get the ball spinning backwards. And yeah, that is part of the reason, but it's the funneling motion that pushes the ball towards the index finger last. That's the more important reason that we snap our wrist. And when you shoot with a dead hand and no wrist snap, you're at complete, what's the word I'm looking for? You're being completely controlled by what part of the hand the ball comes off of last. Whereas the snap of the wrist will force it to come off the correct part last. So even if it's just a tiny, like, doesn't have to be a full wrist snap, but just a tiny funneling motion will be better than nothing at all. That would be my biggest thing.
Okay, that's actually a good point, because I've heard it lately being taught as a sort of like a high five motion, that you just sort of are pushing it up there and you're leaving your hand in sort of a high five position. But I guess you still prefer to have some sort of snap.
Something, just a portion of that funneling motion. I don't want to just get that. People say it's faster. This takes milliseconds. So we can do that most of the time. I would rather take a few extra milliseconds and get the ball coming off the part of my hand that I want than being at the will of which part the ball wants to come off last. I'll take one extra shot block a year if I can increase my percentage by 10%.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's a couple more questions here, but I have a question. Obviously a big topic in the last year with shooting, the rise of Steph Curry and a few others is kind of the discussion of one or two motion shooters. I kind of see it as that a lot of the big guys are naturally two motion shooters. It's hard to shoot a one motion shot from a post. But what's your kind of take on it? Does it really matter for you? Or how do you approach in being a one or two motion shooter? And have you changed maybe a two motion shooter to become a one motion shooter to tackle some of the bad habits that they had and to get a better result?
I don't think there are tremendous differences between those two things. I think the positions are all the same. And so if you're not aware of what coach is talking about, a one motion shooter, the ball continues moving through the set point. A two motion shooter, there'll be a little pause at the set point and then they go. So Steph Curry would be a great example of a one motion shooter, whereas Klay Thompson would be a good example of a two motion shooter, or Ray Allen. As long as the positions are correct, and as long as you're strong enough to be a two motion shooter, if you choose to be one, I don't have a preference. So with NBA players, there's part of me that would actually prefer two motion because with that little pause there, we now have a shorter shooting motion and therefore less room for error, theoretically. Young players, on the flip side, I think most need to continue that power flowing. And so almost all youth players I would encourage, or wouldn't even encourage, I just teach to be a one motion shooter as much as we possibly can. And then if I've got an NBA player and they're one motion, I keep them one motion. If they're two motion, I try and keep them two motion. I don't think that is the reason they're weak. I think it's the positions that they're missing while doing that is causing them to be weak.
All right, good stuff. Let's take the last question from our audience for tonight. Riku Lanti has another question. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, hi. Yeah, I have a bit of a personal question that relates to this topic. I have a player who happens to be my son, 11-year-old, and his right hand is his dominant hand. He writes with the right hand. He dribbles better, or started to dribble with the right hand. He started to shoot layup with the right hand, but he shoots jump shoot with the left hand, and it came naturally. I haven't paid any. I just let him do as he does. I just wonder, would this become a problem? I read somewhere some years ago that there was an NBA or an NCAA Division I player who actually changed hands over the summer break from left to right or whatever. And as a background, myself, I write with the left hand, but I always have been shooting with the right hand. And no jokes from fellow coaches here that perhaps you have changed your hand, but do you see this issue, or is this fine? Should he continue doing as is natural for him?
Let me handle something in there. You said the player at the NBA level or the NCAA. That player was Tristan Thompson, who switched from left-handed to right.
Okay.
The shooting coach that helped him
the case quite well then.
is this guy right here. So
yeah.
I consider myself a bit of an expert on should we switch hands, and my answer is almost always no. The only reason that we switched Tristan's hand was because he picked the wrong hand when he was a kid. When he was probably around the age of your son, he was shooting one shot right-handed and then another shot left-handed because he's ambidextrous. And the coach said to him, pick one. And he said, I don't know which one to pick. They both feel comfortable. And the coach said to him, which hand do you write with? He said, all right, I write with my left hand. He said, perfect, shoot with your left hand. And that's how they made the decision. This is a fine motor skill. This is a gross motor skill. And so the question that he got asked probably wasn't the right question. And that's the biggest thing that I've learned. I now ask, you don't play baseball and you don't play American football in Finland, right? But you do play handball. You play a lot of handball. Is that correct?
Not much, but if he throws a tennis ball, he throws it with the right hand. I think so. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So then the question is he a good shooter at his age?
at his age, yes, perhaps. I mean, there are a lot of things. I think the grip from the ball is not perfect, and there are, of course, a lot of things. But he has been playing or shooting for many years. So
But
when
is
I
his-
compare at his age, there are other players who have played for 1 year or 2 years, and he has played for 4 or 5 years. So it's hard to say really. But
But if it's,
Jipe, what you would say if you are still online?
if his
Well, yeah,
touches,
Well, I guess it's a pretty solid shot, but it's in the early phases
Yeah.
still.
okay.
But
I would leave it.
Yeah, I think the reality is that at the 11, it is true that some youth players, they have played for 4 or 5 years already, so there's quite a lot of repetition behind. So how easy it is to change even at that age.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that part of it necessarily, because you say 4 or 5 years, that's a lot of repetition. And I think 4 or 5 years, that's hardly any. Like, so like, remember, in my world, I'm working with players in their 30s. Those habits are hard to break when you've got a kid younger. So don't let that be the deciding factor. These kids are so malleable. They're so able to change. It can be done. I'm so horrible with how to pronounce names. I'm going to take a guess on there's a question at the bottom of the chat here. Is it Yarmo?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yep.
That's pretty good. Okay, I'll take pretty good. So Yarmo, I wouldn't worry about dominant eye either. That's something that I rarely pay attention to, or not pay attention to, rarely factor into a decision. The reality with shooting is we use both eyes, because a big portion of shooting is depth perception. And so with most aiming sports, like using a gun or a bow and arrow, we're thinking about a two-dimensional target. And so that's why we can close our eye and focus on a dominant eye, because we don't have to gauge depth. With shooting, we do, and we need both of our eyes for that. So I focus on, I don't care which one is dominant. I would like the ball to be as close to online with both of our eyes as we can possibly get it. I will let the ball drift over slightly onto the shooting hand side so that a player can get the middle of their hand underneath the middle of the ball. But those are the two things I worry about: the hand on the ball and using both eyes as much as I possibly can, not trying to align with the dominant eye.
All right. Hey, thank
Sorry,
you.
can I ask one really fast
Go ahead.
one from there about the dominant hand? I have a player shooting with the right hand. It's going in decently. It looks horrible. When he does a left-handed layup, that looks awesome. It just looks so great. When I asked from the parents, the kid is writing with his right hand, but he's shooting the football with the left one. So in this case, you might consider changing the hand, right?
How old?
Hold on, 2008, so 12.
Yeah, so Tristan Thompson made the decision. He was very resistant in the beginning. I wasn't a part of the process until the decision was made to switch. But one of the things that he did one day is he went to the gym with his agent, and he shot 100 shots with his left hand and then 100 shots with his right hand. And at the end of 100 shots, he said, my right hand was starting to already feel pretty comfortable, even just after 100 reps. And the results were way better than the hand that I shoot with in games in the NBA. So
Yeah.
he got very clear indication right there. Like, just start to plant these seeds. If you see a tremendous difference, then see if you can expose him to that and just get him thinking, if you think it's the right thing to do. And again, I very rarely worry about these like, this has become a big topic of conversation in the last few years, but I think it's a little bit too big at times. I don't think this is what's holding most players back.
Yeah, we've asked this player sometimes to take the jump shots with the left hand, and this player isn't resistant about anything. He just always listens and wants to learn. So I don't think we have any issues with this. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that was an hour and a half. I certainly learned a lot, and hopefully the people in the audience learn a lot. And I can't thank you enough, Dave, for being here with us tonight and sharing the game and spreading the knowledge of shooting basketball. Like I said, hopefully you were the first guest on our hopefully a long time running webinar series. So hopefully long after the pandemic is over and people don't even remember what the Zoom meetings are anymore, we can still bring them and make them fashionable. So hopefully we can have you back and with a maybe more another topic, within shooting, of course. So thanks a lot, Dave. Really appreciate you being with us, and all the best of you, with this summer. And hopefully we can work on that, having that clinic in Finland, and see you here live in person.
That would be wonderful. I look forward to that, and thank you for everything that you did to organize everything. I know you did a lot of work to get this organized for us. So thanks for inviting me, and thanks for doing all that work.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, guys. You guys take care.
All right, thanks a lot for everybody. Vaihdetaan Suomeen tässä. Kiitoksia kaikille. Tässä ruudulla vielä näkyy nämä ohjeet, miten jos olet päivittämässä sun valmennuslisenssiä, niin tosiaan kirja havainto näistä 3 eri näkökulmasta: uudistavaa, vahvistavaa ja reflektoitavaa. Ja sen jälkeen, kun olet 4 näistä 6 webinaarista katsonut ja raportoinut, niin laittakaa Jussi Räikälle viestiä jussi.raikka@basket.fi, niin saa A- ja B-lisensin saa päivitettyä. Ja tosiaan meillä on Joonas Iisalo ja Anton Mirolibov ja Lassi Tuovi on tässä tämän vuoden puolella jo rekrytoitu tähän näin vieraaksi, ja sitten on luvassa 2 varmaankin kansainvälistä vierasta, mutta ainakin omasta näkövinkkelistä niin aika kovalla setupilla aloitettiin, ja itse ainakin opin paljon, niin kuin sanoin. Toivottavasti kaikki viihtyy ja hyvää yötä ja hyviä treenejä taas huomenna. Kiitos.
Kiitos.